Well, we're coming to our last session here.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think all of a sudden it was like, oh, all of a sudden it was here. So good, and it's been good.
I just think this is so great that you, as a French horn player, are conscientious enough to do this, and even to do it, try to do it on saxophone, and then to try to get where you can give more for your kids. That's really great.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm loving it. I'm getting excited about next year
Yeah.
to do some of this stuff, and I'm more. I think I'll be more ready than ever. I know I'm more ready than ever to so.
Concert programming. You probably have some thoughts on this. What are some thoughts that maybe you've had from other classes or past on, okay, you're planning your concert.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a difference here between whether you're planning three tunes or whether you're planning an entire concert.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And a lot of times in the school, we're planning two or three tunes for the jazz band because next is the concert band and next is the and
Right.
next you got a whole night of it.
A whole bunch of different ensembles, and yeah.
Yeah. And so the jazz band itself might only do two or three tunes.
Mhm.
Okay, so we should talk about that. And that would be similar thinking, I think, to what if you're going to a festival with your band?
Mhm.
Again, you're probably going to only program three tunes.
Yeah.
Most festivals, especially for younger bands, don't give you enough time to play more than three tunes.
Right. Yeah.
You have to kind of think in terms of three. We could also talk in terms of four in case you had more time, but and then we need to talk in terms of what about the entire What if you're doing an hour or an hour and a half concert?
It's just yeah.
You probably
Right.
wouldn't do an hour and a half with your high school band, but
No, I don't think I will, but you never know. Maybe someday.
yeah,
So,
maybe at the end of the year you play a longer concert like that, where you
yeah.
wouldn't be prepared to do that earlier in the year. But,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
let's just talk about the small set first. If you're thinking about a small set, like let's say three tunes, and this might be your festival set, or it might be the set you're going to play on the fall concert at school. What did you think of?
Yeah. So, I mean, normally what I have done, and then this went along with what I read in the chapter, was it chapter 24 or 25 yesterday? Um, I usually think upbeat at the beginning and upbeat at the end with something
Yeah,
contrasting, and
contrast
usually
in the middle.
a ballad like in the middle, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so it sometimes it kind of just depends on what the charts are. But I often would do a swing tune at the beginning and then do a straight eighth tune at the end.
yep. I think that's good thinking. And then you're more of a ballad in the middle. The
Yeah.
ballad is probably usually a jazz ballad, but it could be a rock ballad too,
Hmm. Yeah.
or something that just has a little more of a mellow, downward contrasting effect. I
Yeah. Yeah. Something that has a different effect.
think that's good thinking. Usually, I think in our state, I think in most states, we have requirements for the festival set that you need to play a swing tune in your,
Yeah.
and you also need to play a ballad in your
Yeah.
set. And so adding to that a straight eighth note tune, like either a Latin tune or a funk tune, rock tune of some kind. The kids, all of course, really latch onto those.
Yeah. Yeah. They do.
Those are good morale builders, but they need the education of playing the swing tunes too. The
Mhm.
problem is they just don't hear that as much.
Right. Yeah. So it's a
It
little.
is out there. I mean, we still hear it on some movies and things, but when I was a kid growing up, everything was based on swing, big
Really.
band
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, all the movies and all the TV things and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Now it's not so much.
It's not. Definitely
Yeah.
not.
I've
Which.
noticed when I educate that the kids always do better on the straight eighth note tunes. And I
Mhm.
think it's
Yeah.
because they hear it a lot more. So that's a good message. And well, okay, then how do we get them to hear more of the swing stuff so they can sound good on that too?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is just exposing it to them and playing it with them and listening in.
And this is what I did for years. I actually would put everything. Well, at first it was on cassettes, then it was on CDs, and I'd put everything on the CD that I had that was on the concert and have the kids listening to it and be able to play along with it for their solo work and all that kind of thing. Um, then after a while, I started putting everything in a Dropbox folder, and then I'd send them a link to the Dropbox folder.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I be doing. It's basically
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah. Now you could almost just have them stream everything if they were going to look it up, but it takes a little more initiative and a little more get on it to
Uh-huh.
do that. So it's better if you can kind of create a way for them to do it a little more easily, I think.
Yeah. Or it's just set right in the middle.
But if we can get them listening, that makes a lot of difference on that swing tune. But yeah, no, I think that's good thinking. If you added another tune in there, let's say you did 4 tunes.
Hmm.
Now at BYU, we used to give the bands 20 minutes. Now we give the bands a half hour, so they actually could plan a 4 tune uh,
Okay.
with 30 minutes. Of course, that includes getting on and getting off and so on. But if you got 30 minutes, you could program 4 tunes. Now what would your thinking be? I don't know if I can't remember if I put that in the book or not, but
I think there's some mention in. So I think, I mean, definitely there'd still be a ballad in there. And I could see it easily going in either the second or the third slot.
uh-huh.
Um, I think I would probably tend to put it. I mean, so I think I would start with the same kind of piece, probably a swing tune, um, and then I'd probably put the ballad second, and then the third and fourth tune. One of them would be probably another swing tune. One of them would be a straight eighth tune, either a Latin or fusion. And
Yeah,
then whichever one had a little bit more energy was a better
right.
ending. Then I would put it as the last one. And
Yeah, good thinking. If I if I had a burning kind of swing thing, I'd probably put it last.
yeah,
Put a funk or Latin thing, but you may not be have a band that's prepared to just do a really burning tempo.
right, right,
So maybe it's better if you could even do this. You could do a swing tune, then your ballad, and then you could do a funk tune, then a Latin tune.
yeah, yeah,
You could
yeah.
have 2 straight 8th of tunes,
Right. Yeah,
And
fish
you're right that
ballad, swing ballad.
you want to kind of climax it at the end. And I'll oftentimes I'll try to program that very last piece to have a drum solo in it because that always brings the crowd to their feet.
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. If
Yeah,
you've got a good drummer who can
yeah,
handle it. But
right.
yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, drum solos are usually crowd pleasers, and of course high trumpet notes are always crowd pleasers.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of energy.
But you're limited on those things sometimes.
Yeah, depending on what kids
Good
I've got. And
situation, yeah. And if you're really not up for it, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, of course, and maybe just do 3 tunes.
yeah. Yep.
But yeah, you got some options there. Now, if you're expanding that to a whole hour set, let's say,
Hmm.
now you got to decide: is it an hour straight through, or or an hour and a half straight through, or does it have a intermission?
Right.
When I'm overseas, typically it depends on what the sponsor wants to do. We just want a straight through 90-minute concert. Thank you. And other times, it'd be great if we could have intermission. We want to sell some concessions and get the people buying stuff, other
Yeah.
things.
Right. Okay.
And so let's do an intermission. So then it becomes like a 2 hour concert with an intermission,
Yeah. Yeah.
or an hour and 45 minutes with the intermission, something like that. But
Hmm.
uh, so that's the first question is always okay. Does it have an intermission? Does it have 2 halves, or is it a straight through concert?
Hmm.
And if you're doing a whole night just with your jazz band for the parents, you might be able to get away with an intermission. Uh, Sometimes it's scary with a young group to do an intermission. You lose your audience; they all go home.
Right. Yep.
So you kind of have to weigh that out and decide. But let's say that you're going straight through, then you don't have to worry about. Well, let's say first of all you're going halves. Then I got to worry about an opener that's good for the first half and a closer that's good for this first half. Then I got
Yep.
to worry about an opener for the second half and then a closer for the second half.
Right. So it's kind of like two concerts right next to each other.
Yeah,
Way.
and then maybe I got to worry about an encore. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
You don't always have to do an encore in a school situation, I think.
No. Yeah.
But so then you say, well, okay, and this is what I do. Okay, here's my list of tunes that I've got. I'm working at, and I put myself under this pressure when we're on tour. I put myself under this pressure every concert because we never play the same concert twice.
Mhm.
And it depends totally on what I feel, where we're at, the kind of attitude that I feel, and and I try to mix it up so that way the band doesn't play the same concert every night and get tired of it, and then that sounds tired to the audience.
Yeah.
Instead, they're on the edge of their seat. They have to stay on their tiptoes every night.
Wonder what they're going to be playing. Yeah.
And so when we get ready to go on tour, and this is different at home, but we got more time at home. But when we get ready to go on tour, we might have anywhere 45 to 60 tunes in the book, that we've worked on across the year. And then I'll have the guys put them in an order and then number them.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so then when I'm at the concert, I can actually call it out, or I can make changes on the spot and say, put 12 on top.
Yeah.
Scrap number 15 and let's do number 24.
Yeah.
And I can
Cool.
do that really fast, and I can say that to the band quickly, and I can be talking to the audience for a second while the band's getting that figured
Yeah.
out. But it's not like they have to look through the. I'll tell you, even with college students, you say, "Can you find such and such a chart?" And they're looking through the whole thing. I can't seem to find that chart. And then it turns out that it's in the folder backwards and upside down.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Yeah. That's so
Anyway, by doing that, I get everybody where they can function more quickly.
sense. Give
But
me,
I'll actually call a concert every night, different concert.
yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And that means
How often do you go on those overseas tours?
it used to be every other year. So we went in 88, 90, 92, 94, 96, 98, 2000. And then we were supposed to go in 2002, and a lot of terrorism started happening, and
All right.
everything got canceled. So we didn't go till 2004. And then
Mhm.
we went 2006, 2008, 2010. And then after 2010, the brethren mandated that the touring program be cut down by a third. So people that were going every year could go every other year, and people that were going every other year went every third year. So that put us in the category of going every third year. So
Yeah.
that we were 2010, and then we had to go 2013, 2016, 2019.
Yeah.
And the next tour would be coming up, but because of the pandemic, they've slid everything over, and then they slid it over again. So,
Yeah.
but we've been on a lot of those tours, and it's been an interesting experience. But all over the world, and I've got to come up with that concert fairly quickly. So
Yeah.
and I've got a list of all that, and I've made a copies of this, so I have a list for every single concert, and then I can write on each one separately. And
Yeah.
I'll just write numbers, and that's my first thinking is, okay, what's my opener? What's my opener for the second half if it's not straight through? What's
Yeah.
my what's my closer for the first half? What's my major closer for the concert?
Yeah.
And and that's how I'm going to start. And then from there, I'm going to think pretty similar to the way we did with the shorter set, because now the short set is probably five, maybe six tunes.
Mhm.
So what I usually do with that is I usually start with a swing tune, and then I'll go to a funk tune. I
Mhm.
think it's good because it kind of sends a message right off the bat to the audience that, hey, we're gonna mix it up here.
Yeah, we're not going to be swinging all the way through. Yeah.
And then I usually go back to some other kind of either swing or Latin tune, so that I've got something higher energy just before I do the ballad. And I usually put the ballad about fourth in that, so that there's two different philosophies on this. One is put the ballad second and then grow from there. But and if I only have a set of three or a four, that's what I'd do. But if I have a set of six, let's say, then I'm going to put the ballad either fourth or fifth, because I want it to be what changes it up, and then we come back and smack them. Hopefully, they with a way that will make them want to stay through the intermission.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
So I'm really looking for, okay, what's my best closer for the first half that might keep people from leaving?
Yeah.
Look at it that way. I usually put that ballad about after a high energy tune, so it creates a good contrast. And usually if I went fourth, then I might do some kind of another swing tune and then a Latin tune to end, or a funk tune to end. So
Mhm.
it's got an infectious groove. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the second half, I'd think similarly, except that I want to be sure that I've got two at the end. Maybe the ballad's fourth, and then I've got Or if I'm only doing five, maybe the ballad's third. I
Mhm.
might do six in the first half, five in the second half. The ballad is third, let's say, and then fourth, I've got a tune that brings the energy up quite a bit, and then fifth, I've got a tune that brings the energy up the rest of the way,
Yeah. Okay.
so that everybody wants an encore, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. You want to leave them wanting more.
Yeah, the encore I think should not be a really long tune. If you do an encore, I think it should be a shorter, nice tune, something that kind of caps it off, almost like a nice after dinner mint.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Something everyone will enjoy, but that isn't too heavy.
But I try to mix up the styles. I mean, we call synthesis for a reason. Uh, Back in early 70s, Dallin H. Oakes was the president of the university.
Hmm.
And at that time, it used to be like the BYU Jazz Ensemble. And
Hmm.
then it became vogue across the country to be, now we're more eclectic, so we're doing the BYU Jazz and Rock Ensemble.
Hmm.
And Newell Daly, who was directing the band at the time, got a call from Dallin H. Oakes, and he says, the brethren are not that sure they want to have a rock ensemble. Can you think of another name?
That's funny.
And that was actually Newell Daly that came up with that name, as synthesis connotes a bringing together of separate elements and bringing
Yeah.
them together into one, and that was always the idea behind synthesis, was that we're not just doing jazz, not just doing swing, we're doing rock, we're doing Latin, funk, we're doing fusion, or, well, whatever. We're doing jazz waltz,
Yeah.
we're doing a variety of things.
Yeah.
And actually, when I first came to BYU, it had gotten to a point that happened while I was a student at BYU. But then I went away, got my doctor's degree, came back to teach. When I came back to teach, it had actually reached the point that in the description it said country and classical and stuff like that. I had him take it out.
Yeah. Like, well, we're not going to do all of those.
But while that had that country in the description, I decided, yeah, let's do a country tune. So I had Bob Leisure. He was the bass player in the band, and he could do an amazing, wonderful Johnny Cash imitation.
Okay.
And I had Dan Truman in the band, and Dan at that time he was playing piano. He became one of my TAs too in the jazz combo program and everything. But Dan was really kind of soaking in Floyd Kramer and some of these country pianists and stuff.
Mhm.
And so he had some of those licks down. In fact, he used to even after he moved to Nashville, he'd come back, take a visit to the office, and he'd drop by and say, "Let me show you what I've been working on." And he'll sit down at the piano and play this stuff. And he says, "It's kind of a combination between bebop and Floyd Kramer." And he became the pianist for Diamond Rio, which
Okay.
became a huge country band from Nashville.
Uh-huh.
He
Yeah. I
still,
was gonna say that
he,
name sounds familiar.
yeah, he still lives in Nashville.
Cool.
And got into that. But anyway, he was on piano. So I brought in another kid to play bass so that Bob Lazier could come out front. And he picked up a guitar, put on a cowboy shirt, and he wrote a tune for the occasion. It's like, I'm just a bebopping cowboy. Tritone's just about my favorite thing. It was really funny.
That's great. That's awesome.
But I said, no, let's get that out of there. We don't have to be quite that wide. But I've always tried to create a wide variety in the
Mhm.
way that we handle tunes, because that's really what our name means, and it's kind of what. And I feel like most of the jazz bands across the country probably do that, but some of them don't. Some of them play one kind of thing. In fact, some of them, the band director writes the charts, and so they're not just one kind of thing. They're like one writer. Everything's the same.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's pretty dull, both for the kids and the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. Then the kids miss out on a lot of variety and experience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And okay, I don't usually program In the Mood on a regular BYU concert, but on my tours overseas, I do. That makes it a fantastic encore. I mean,
Yeah,
it cuts across four generation lines. People of all ages dig it.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And it's like the band isn't digging it, but it makes a great encore. And I've used it that way sometimes. And I think the band needs to have the experience of playing some of those classic dance swing things, And so every year, you probably know this, but every year at Valentine's time, we do a big band dance where we have a whole night of playing just that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So the kids can learn something about what's it like to play a dance rumba or a dance cha-cha or
hmm
tango, or how does a dance waltz, how does the American dance waltz go versus a jazz waltz, or and things like that, and they
hmm
have a chance to learn some different things about style. I think when they get outside the university, they're going to end up needing to know some stuff about that.
yeah, yeah. That makes
So I try to teach. We actually don't rehearse everything we're going to play on that at all because I make it a reading gig. But
sense.
we rehearse enough. We rehearse something of each type of thing so that I can teach a mindset about this is a cha cha. What's your mindset for a cha cha?
Yeah,
Oh, straight eighth notes, super crisp staccatos. Bup 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 bup. They're not dot do dot 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 do dot. They're
yeah,
like way more crisp staccato. Or what's your mindset for a Roomba? It's very much like a cha-cha in a lot of ways, except, again, straight eighth notes, but legato instead of so chunky as
yeah,
a cha-cha. Okay, what's your mindset for a jazz for a dance waltz? Well, a dance waltz is in 3/4, and it goes in three. Chuck chuck, chuck chuck, chuck chuck. Whereas a jazz waltz is usually in 1, 2, 3, chuck 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 chuck, and then
um,
the hi hat is like and a 1 and 3, chuck 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 chuck, instead of chuck 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 on two
yeah,
and three. And it's usually faster and in one, and it swings.
hmm
Whereas the American dance waltz is straight eighth notes.
hmm
So I have a chart on Henry Mancini, Moon River. Ba da 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 da. Straight eighth notes.
hmm
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I do have a time when I try to have the band have that experience and try to get a little of a mindset. Now I might even play an example of a particular kind of tune.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's not bad. And I think it doesn't hurt occasionally to include something like that. I've occasionally included, I have this thing called the Salute to the Big Bands. It's about 7 minutes long and it goes through about four, it goes through about four, no, it goes through about seven. It goes through about seven different swing tunes. Some
okay.
are like Benny Goodman, some of them are Tommy Doris, some of them are Glenn Miller, and and it's a crowd pleaser. People
Yeah,
love that stuff, and I'll especially on an overseas concert. If I don't want to play a lot of that stuff, I may play that tune to at least have a
excellent.
something for that group of people.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense.
So anyway, those are some of the thoughts I'd have. I think that when you're going to a festival, here's another thing you need to think of is that they are looking at your choice of charts. I mean, I have actually judged at festivals where bands came and played In the Mood, and you go, uh, okay, this is a respected tune, but it's not the kind of thing that you'd program at a festival.
Yeah, okay.
It's a crowd pleaser, but it's like, okay, this isn't really showing though what you might have accomplished or could accomplish. You need to choose something that.
hmm
So yeah, there's a place on the adjudication form use of materials.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it up to speed? Is it up to what the band should do?
Yeah, good, 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 good. So maybe a question about that when looking for charts. I guess I mean you had like in the book you had a list of like websites that you had listed, and arrangers and composers that you trust.
Yeah.
But maybe when it comes to like a festival, how would you go about finding charts or tunes that are appropriate or that are likely to be a good fit for a festival setting?
Yeah. And this is where you want to, I mean, think about this in just in general terms for a minute. Let's say that you're programming a French horn recital.
Yeah.
And so you've got let's say you've got a transcription of the Bach Arioso, da 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 da. Okay, it's a great tune. I'm sure you've heard it.
Mhm.
It's a great tune, but is that really fitting for a horn recital? You're gonna say, no, we really need to do some of the French horn stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, some of the stuff that's like the Warhorse material, and stuff. You
Uh-huh.
know what I'm saying?
Yep. Oh yeah.
I think it's a similar attitude when you're programming for the jazz ensemble. You wouldn't program the stuff that you might program at a school dance.
Hmm. Yeah.
Instead, you're going to program things that are more audience oriented and more substantial. That's the word I want.
Hmm.
They're more substantial. They require a commitment of the band and some hard work. And the band director is going to say, "Wow, you're doing that chart, and you're doing it well. Great, one superior."
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas if you program something like In the Mood, the attitude would be, hmm, probably not really appropriate for this setting, and a little bit of a markdown for that.
Yeah.
In general terms, that's what I'd say. You want something substantial. Now, how to really define that for you is difficult to do.
Right. That makes sense. And I guess part of that maybe just comes with time and experience and being around the jazz world and attending jazz festivals and hearing what other groups are playing and kind of
Yeah,
hearing and
absolutely.
seeing how things react and what works well and what doesn't work well.
And sometimes even talking to other band directors. Hey, have you got any ideas about some festival idea? For example, I get an email from or a text from Howard Summers. He's out at Sky Ridge High School.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know Howard or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
He's a very good band director, good musician, good player. And Howard will say, "Do you have any thoughts on a ballad that would feature the alto saxophone?" And I get questions like that quite often.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and it's like, or do you have any thoughts on something that would really be a great closer for a festival set? I occasionally get a question like that'll come
Okay.
to
Yeah.
me.
Cool.
And then I think about that band and that situation, about where I think that band is, and then I got a better thought about what I might try to
Yeah.
suggest. you know, and that's one that came to mind because that's one I got just this last year. He had decided to feature Danon, who's one of my students actually, Danon McNeil on the alto saxophone. What's a good chart for that? Okay, then I got a chance to have some input on it.
Yeah.
But I
Cool.
think if you're smart, you don't mind involving other people in that a little bit. And you ask questions and you learn from people that have had more experience.
That makes sense. That's a good idea. Yeah. Sometimes they need to be more willing to ask
You've got
questions.
something that if you got something you think's maybe on the line, like teetering a little bit, like okay, is this really substantial enough for a jazz fest or something? You might call one of your colleagues and say, "What do you think about this chart for a festival set? Do you think it's too lightweight?" You know,
Yeah.
see what he says.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
I tell you this, I learned a lot about programming. Let's say you're going to I've had my band perform a number of times at the Jazz Education Network, or previous to that, the International Association for Jazz Education.
Mhm.
And I've played at these major outings where you got anywhere from three, four, up to 7,000 jazz people out there, and you're playing at an event. It's like the largest jazz festival in the world, and you're playing for all jazz people. It's
Mhm.
like you got to play something substantial, and it's got
Oh
to be
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And so I got into a certain mode of how to think about that. That probably was okay. But then I got overseas, and we were playing at the North Sea Jazz Festival in Holland. And we had 2 nights in a row that we were playing there. And the
Mhm.
first night, I programmed like I would at a jazz festival like that. It fell flat on its face. The audience half of them left before it was over, and any applause was just really polite pitter patter. Nothing really. There was no investment from the audience in this thing, And so I thought, wow, that felt bad. So then I looked. We watched some other bands in the meantime, and they
Mhm.
were playing stuff, even sometimes like In the Mood and stuff, where they were like the audience just like wow into it. It was like,
Yeah.
hmm. I had about 2 more weeks before we played at the Montreux Jazz Festival, but we were actually an invited band to play on the big band night. It was going to be a 24-track recording, 5-camera video shoot. It was like a big deal, and
Yeah.
and I had planned like some heavy duty stuff. And it's like, Over the next 2 weeks, I experimented, and by the time I got to the Montreux Jazz Festival, I programmed stuff I never thought I would play at a jazz festival. I mean, I programmed all of me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
That's not something I would usually think of, although we did the Basie chart on it, the Basie version. So it's a credible chart, and as I think about it, it was a good choice, I think. But I was just not thinking that way, until I had some kind of negative experiences with some of that substantial stuff where it's like, okay, does anybody actually dig it? Is anybody
Right. Yeah.
here?
Interesting, because just a different audience. Yeah.
Yeah. And I learned a lot from that. Later, I was directing the pro band at the Birch Creek Music Camp in Wisconsin. And Jim Dutton is the organizer and owner of that. He's passed away now. They've still got it going. But I did it about 3 different summers. And I was directing the big band, the pro band, and I had to program all these different concerts across a 2-week period. And I remember Jim saying to me, "No, I don't want any of that white college jazz crap on these programs." Well, what's he talking about? He's talking about those kind of ostentatious intellectual charts, that sometimes we might think about planning for a jazz education network concert.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
don't want any of that crap. I want stuff that says something to the audience. Now, these early experiences, I learned a lot from those things.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense.
So that by the time here we are in 2003, I think it was, yeah, 2003, we were an invited band to perform on the night concert at this region IHAE conference in Las Vegas. And another band that was invited was this really excellent band from California, whose band director had played with Buddy Rich and others, and he actually wrote most of the charts for the band himself, and they tended to be that kind of intellectual kind of those intellectual charts that don't really communicate a lot to the audience. That
Mhm.
they're it's kind of like music for other musicians.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Yep.
they'll appreciate it,
Yep.
not music for normal people, so to speak.
Yep.
and and we programmed a concert that I felt was substantial, but had a lot of audience charisma to it, and we went on afterwards. I mean, the first band went on from California, and they played all that kind of heavier, more intellectualized kind of stuff that didn't have a lot of emotional content to it. Now, I'm not saying it should just be emotional content. I think it's aesthetic experience that we're really after, which is a lot more than just emotion. It's a
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, but but it but the audience didn't have much to say about the California band. It was just kind of,
Mhm.
yeah, nice, yeah. And then we came out and it was like, yeah, and everybody's on their feet and like, I mean, I had a letter from Jeff Benedict, who was teaching at Cal State LA at that time, and he said that's the best big band concert I've ever heard.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's a jazzer, and it affected him. And I
Cool.
think that we shouldn't forget that jazzers are people and that they can also feel emotional things.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, and so I'll give you another classic example of this. I was at an IHAA conference in New Orleans, and they advertised the Tenor Summit. This was going to be the summit of great tenor saxophone players. I mean, I don't know if you know all these names, but there was Michael Brecker, David Liebman, uh, Joe Lovano. I think that's what it is. Michael Brecker, Dave Liebman, Joe Lovano. Okay, all these guys are amazing saxophone players. They can all play great jazz, great inside, and people were very excited about this. And it started at midnight, and the people were lined up for an hour ahead of time to try to make sure they got a spot in the room.
Uh-huh.
I was one of the people who got in,
Uh-huh.
and I was really pleased to be there. I have a lot of respect for each of those players, but they chose to take it so far out
Mhm.
that half, and this is for a jazz audience, this is not a lay audience, this is jazz people.
Yeah.
After the first tune, half the audience left after waiting an hour to get in.
Oh
I
wow,
thought,
that's crazy.
well, maybe they'll take it up. Well, they didn't take it up. They took it farther out, and
Yeah.
really halfway through the second tune, another fourth of the audience, another half of that, what was left, about a fourth, in other words, of the whole audience left. And by the third tune, there was only about a fourth of the audience left. And people were like, this isn't worth it. I need my sleep. They were going to bed.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a sad thing when you
Yeah.
choose to not, to play in such a way that it doesn't mean anything to anybody. I, I
Yeah.
will tell you, I will tell you one more quick story. Do you know who Sam Carden is?
No.
No.
Oh, Sam Carden. It sounds familiar.
Yeah. He wrote music for a lot of stuff you've heard. For example, you've probably seen the movies The Work and the Glory.
Uh-huh.
Sam wrote all the music for all those
Okay. Yeah.
movies and a whole lot of other things. And he works for KBYU now, or on BYU TV now. But anyway, he's a great writer. And he, uh, this was right after I left BYU, actually, but um, he told me about this later. He said there was a fellow who was working on his eighth year. He'd been at BYU for 8 years working on. He was in his eighth year of schooling, and he was working on a doctorate in composition.
Mhm.
Well, what's a doctorate in composition these days? It's a doctorate in serialism, 12-tone technique, in other words, and a lot of those kind of
Yeah.
avant-garde techniques and stuff. It's a lot of avant-garde. Well, I think there's a place for that. I think I told you before that I really got into that for a while, but then maybe that wasn't you. I can't think of it.
No, I don't think you have mentioned it to me, but
I was really into that for a while. I even had a group that did it myself until one day I looked out and realized, I'm digging this, but nobody out there is. There's something wrong with this picture.
yeah. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, this was interesting because this guy was working on his eighth year in his doctoral program, and Sam talked him into going with him down to this particularly great R&B band concert in Provo. And the guy had never been to anything like that. He'd never heard anything like that. And he was just on the edge of his chair the whole time, just rapt attention. It was a really good band.
Yeah.
And at the end, he stood up and he said to Sam, I can't believe that I've spent 8 years studying music that doesn't communicate nothing to nobody. This
Wow.
music really communicates. And he was just thrilled by it. And it affected him so much that he went up and checked out of the program.
What? After 8 years, he didn't even
Yeah.
finish.
That's kind of unfortunate. I mean, if I'd have been there, I would have said, no, no, man, play
No,
the game, get the paper, then you can do what
finish,
you want.
and then go. Yeah, for sure. Wow.
But he
Oh
actually
man.
checked out of the program. So I think we do have to be careful how we program, that it's going to be something that's communicative, that actually communicates something to people. Yeah.
Yep. Definitely. And I think that plays a role into retention, especially at the high school level,
Yeah,
in terms of my students.
absolutely.
If they're not playing anything that they connect with on any level,
That's right.
then they're not going to be interested.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And then if they're not interested, the audience is going to feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
But if they're engaged and they're feeling it, and then the audience feels it, and then you get all that feedback from the audience, that's a winner.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So that's a lot of stuff on programming, but I think I honestly think that one of the most important things I do as a jazz band director is choose the music. And by the way, at least at my level, I don't just grab a piece of music and say, guys, here's what we will play. Instead, my approach has been over the years, let's read this chart. Hey, not bad. Do you guys like it? Yeah, we're digging it. Or sometimes it's like, seems too commercial, or seems too lightweight, or I don't really like it. Now, once in a while, it's a chart where I know it's a good chart, and I know if they actually spent some time and played it better that they'd like it.
Yeah. Okay.
So sometimes I'll encourage that, but if there's really a negative attitude about it in the rehearsal, I just pull it back. I don't even consider playing it anymore, because I want the band to be into what we're doing. And
Yeah.
if they're into it, then they will invest themselves in their personal practice and their sectionals, and it'll show in the concert.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that makes total sense.
So I actually give the band a say to an extent.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't lose control of that, but to an extent, I give the band a say in what we play, what we program.
Cool.
Of course, I'm the one initiating the thought in the first place. I'm only initiating thoughts that I think might be worthwhile. Sometimes we're reading stuff though that I don't know at all, and we read it, and I'll go, I'm not digging it that much. Yeah, we're not either. It's like, okay, pass it back.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense.
But I think you want the kids to have a chance to. I do the same thing when I'm programming a recital. With my students when they're getting ready for a recital. I don't say, "Here's what you'll play on your recital." I've always felt it was a better approach to say, "Here's two or three things that I think could be really great. Which one would you choose?" We'll listen a little bit. It's like, "Oh man, I feel like that really speaks to me." All right,
Yeah.
let's do that.
Right.
Okay, now for a second slot, let's consider one of these kinds of things. So let me just show you a couple of things. Oh man, I really love that one. Okay, let's do that. Because they're going to spend a lot of time getting it ready for that recital.
Mhm. Yeah. It's got to be something that they want to
Yeah,
engage in.
right. So anyway, I have usually given the band. I'm a little bit democratic that way in a way. I try not to be totally autocratic.
But I think it's valuable. I think it's
Yeah.
valuable.
Uh, on the other hand, I think that there's a place for teaching the students and teaching the audience where you give them some things that are really good and you say, and here's something really educational,
Mhm.
you know, and it's like, I don't know, that's interesting. And maybe it opens a door.
Yeah. Kind of spread their willingness out a little bit.
Yeah. David Sanborn actually did that with a radio program. He used to have this syndicated radio program where he played a lot of jazz fusion, funk and fusion type music.
Mhm.
And he got an audience really accustomed to that. And then he started saying, once in a while, he'd say, and here's something you really should hear. This is a John Coltrane thing. And there was an educational thing that came in once he had the people in his hand. Then he'd
Yeah.
educate them a little bit.
Cool.
Which I think there's a place for that in concert programming too.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm just saying if the whole concert's like that, you're going to lose everybody,
Yep.
the students and the audience. Yeah. So I don't. Yeah, this is of course is a lot of my thinking, but a lot of my attitude about things. And this attitude has been formed by some hard experiences. Sometimes, as I've already shared a couple of ideas with you about that. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's one of the big reasons I'm in this class is to get your perspective and to learn from your experiences. So it's good.